on Facebook and YouTube. The recording will be made available after the webinar, and responses to the questions that we're not able to take during the next 2 hours will be shared within the next few days. Kindly make use of the question and answer box for your questions. Questions can also be sent to us via our other channels. Today promises to be an insightful session. We have industry experts, and I would take the next few minutes to introduce our speakers for today. We have Mr. Olusegun Alebiosu, who is currently the Executive Director, Chief Risk Officer, and Executive Compliance Officer at First Bank of Nigeria. He has over 28 years of experience in banking and financial services. He has assumed several senior roles across institutions in Nigeria, and he's also affiliated with professional bodies such as the Institute of Chartered Accountants, Nigeria Institute of Management, Chartered Institute of Bankers of Nigeria, the Nigeria Institute of International Affairs, and I'm also proud to say that he is the chairman of CRC Credit Bureau Limited. We also have in our midst Mr. Segun Akinsemi, who is the CEO of Page Financials. He has over 30 years of experience in banking and the financial services industry. He has assumed several leadership roles across the financial landscape. He was a founding team member of Ren Money Microfinance Bank, where he provided strategic leadership, guiding the startup to become one of the country's premier consumer financial institutions today. He's a member of the Institute of Directors and an honorary senior member of the Chartered Institute of Bankers. I'm also pleased to introduce our Group Managing Director, CEO, Dr. Tunde Popola, who is a distinguished Nigerian professional with over 30 years experience in both public and private sectors, I beg your pardon. He assumed as the Group Managing Director of CRC January 1st, but I also need to mention that he has pioneered this company's growth since its inception in 2008. Prior to CRC, he was the CEO of the Abuja Enterprise Agency, and he has held several roles in the banking industry, including CFO and General Manager of a publicly listed bank. He has several awards. He has received several awards and several recognitions in his personal and professional capacity. And under his leadership, CRC Credit Bureau Limited has won several awards, including the Best Credit Bureau Nigeria for 3 consecutive years from the Capital Finance International. Beyond his corporate roles, he's a renowned speaker at global seminars. He focuses on entrepreneurship and initiatives to strengthen the financial systems for sustainable and economic growth. His contributions have made a significant impact in Nigeria's financial landscape and internationally. So you would all agree with me today that our speakers will do justice to the topic. Thank you everyone once again for joining us today. We're happy to bring this webinar to you, and we believe that you will gain a lot of insights today. At this juncture, I will be calling on Dr. Tunde Popola to give us the welcome address and further introductions. You're welcome, sir.
Good morning, everyone. I hope you can see me. You can see my slide. And
yes, we can, sir.
Okay. All right, so good morning, everyone. It's my pleasure to be with us this morning and to welcome us to this very interesting engagement. I was trying to show my slide, but I couldn't. I don't know whether you can see my slide, actually. Can you see my slides?
Yes, we can. Yes, sir. We can see your slides.
Okay, all right. Thank you so much. So good morning. It's my pleasure to welcome us to this session. And my job is very straightforward. I'm just to set the context for the discussion we are going to be having this morning. This is the 13th edition of You and Credit webinar series, established by CRC Credit Bureau. And today we'll be looking at managing credit exposure during the challenging macroeconomic period. And like it was rightly said by my colleague Peggy, we are in an unusual time, and we thought one of our contributions as a credit bureau that have a database of all borrowers in Nigeria is to see how we can help borrowers to, navigate the challenges, the economic and the environment where we are today. So my job this morning, the next 10 to 15 minutes, is just to go through the landscape of the macroeconomy and to see where we are on issues around credit and to see what role we play as a credit bureau to help borrowers in particular at this particular critical period of our economy. And if we have the time, we will talk around what we do as a credit bureau for the interest of those who may not be familiar with what we do. So it's a very challenging period. The economy is volatile. There are quite a lot of things going on around the exchange rates, around the interest rates, around the foreign exchange rates. There are issues around security, energy crisis, and so many other market dynamics. And all of these have implications for access to credit in the first instance, and for those who have already have access to credit and how their businesses are being affected by a lot of these variables that I talk about. Let's start from the perspective of the economy itself. If you look at the slide on the screen, you realize that in the last 5 to 6 years, there have been significant issues around growing the economy. We went even to recession in 2020. We came out of that recession to get to 3.4. But 2022, 2023, you realize that there have been declines, successful decline in GDP. Although for Q4 of last year, we have opportunity of moving it again to 3.15%. But on the average for 2023, it was 2.74. And that means there was a worsening position, a deterioration in the economic landscape of the country when it comes to productivity. And we see that in form of also rise in unemployment situation, number of people in poverty, and so many other indicators that show that things are not just the right for us as an economy as we speak. When we look at the macroeconomic landscape, the drivers of where we are today are basically around inflation, exchange rates, interest rate, and other variables. Now, the inflation rate is even one that is extremely very challenging. In the last 5 years, we've moved from inflation rate of about 12% to 28.9% as of December last year, 2023. And as we speak, as of January to this year in 2024, inflation has jumped to 29.9%. That's very challenging for all of us. And we see it in foodstuffs, we see it in transportation. These are core issues that affect virtually all of us, especially the people below the poverty line. And this also will have significant implication for those who have borrowed or those who are business people, because then cost of things are rising and the disposable income is shrinking. And of course, the ability for people to buy, the effective demand is also going to be affected by all that we see. In fact, when you look at the packaging of some of the products nowadays, everybody is trying, a lot of institutions or companies are trying to see how they can still meet the requirement, the demand, by actually reducing the quantity of what they sell for the same price, or they jack up the price simply because of the inflation rate and the exchange rate. The exchange rate is even much more volatile. As at December, we closed at 6.45 to $1. Starting from, if you look at the last 5 years, we were on 306 to $1 in 2018, and it moved to almost 650 by the end of the year. But today, the dollar is 1,560 to naira to $1, and the black market rate is around 1,585, and people will tell you that you cannot even get the dollar. So that's the kind of issue that we have seen. Devaluation is far more than almost 200%. And at the time, even this year, it hit almost 2,000 naira to $1. And that has very significant implication for production. It has very significant implication for price level. It has significant implication for ability to now borrow and service loans. And to also drive home that issue is now the monetary policy rate that also is rising. The MPR, as it's called, is moved to 18%. And if you see the last MPC meeting, the outcome shows that CRR has gone to 45%, liquidity ratio has gone to about 33%. So it means this constrained ability of banks to lend. That's on one side. On the other side is the fact that when you have rates moving up like this, especially on bonds and treasury bills and all those government instruments, it does not encourage banks to lend, because they can as well just put their liquidity into those instruments. Coupled with that, when you have a lot of their funds sterilized, then it means that there's little available for lending to businesses and to consumers. So it's within this context that we find ourselves in the country today. When the NPR rate moves up like that, then the prime lending rate in banks will move up, and that automatically will translate to increase in interest rate that will be paid by borrowers. So when borrowers are confronted with issues around inflation, around challenges around effective demand by their customers, and they also have to service their loan with higher interest rates, then all of this juxtaposed together creates an environment that's extremely very challenging. Now, the issue around security is also very, very challenging. Social unrest, we have seen in the last 1 week or so, people looting even places that some food items have been kept. And that's saying something. It's saying people are really hungry and hungry. And it also shows that a lot of people have been put out of opportunity to even eat, talk less of doing, engaging in effective demand in some other areas. Now, the other fund, which I think I must not face to mention, is the issue of energy costs. So if you buy diesel now, you know what it is. In the last 1 month, diesel price has been jumping, and it's almost 1,400 as we speak. And that's also so for quite a lot of other products and services, other products. So we have all of this affecting businesses, because it then leads to, increase in cost of services, increase in cost of production for them, increase in expenses that they have to incur to be able to bring their products to the market. And how many customers will they be able to, put this on that will be effectively be ready to still have effective demand for their products? So, and this effectively can then affect their ability to service their loans. So in a complex economic environment like this, borrowers really face heightened difficulties in meeting credit obligations. And I think that's part of the reasons why we think we should put this webinar together today, to say, okay, what should borrowers be doing? What should debtors be doing? How can they, go around this and still have ability to effectively service their loans, and so on and so forth like that. And we are beginning to see deterioration in assets, in loans. We have the privilege to warehouse, borrowers' data, and from what we have seen in recent time, two things have come up. First is that overdue loans has increased significantly. Overdue means there is a default, ability to meet, obligations in line with the terms and conditions of those loans are beginning to be affected adversely. In 2022, around 2.8 million loans were overdue that we saw. But by 2023, it has moved to almost 6 million. This indicates growing challenges for borrowers, as we see. If also you look at non-performing loans, it went down significantly to about 4% by 2022. But by 2023, it has moved up again slightly to 4.3%. And that slight increase is pointing to something. It's pointing to the fact that people and businesses are beginning to experience challenges in their ability to service their loans and to service their obligations. And we can see that the quantum of businesses and individuals that are defaulted in servicing their obligations have risen significantly when you compare 2022 with 2023. So this is very interesting, but it also shows a very challenging time. There's financial stress. There is implication for credit score of individuals. There's implication for access to credit for businesses, and there's implication for ability to meet obligations by various entities in the economy, be individuals or be businesses. This is where we stand today. As a credit bureau, we think we have obligations to support entities, borrowing entities, to be able to, go through this challenging period with some level of sanity, some level of guidance. As a bureau, our job is to provide information to lenders and encourage them to lend with significant opportunity to provide their creditors. So we come up with objective to reduce information asymmetry, in which case we want to encourage lender to have access to very credible information as a third party who is not interested in who gets credit. We also have responsibility to mitigate several market failures that are very common in financial markets around the world. And finally, is for us is to see how we can help data subjects who are basically the borrowers to build very credible credit history, using and encouraging them to use their reputation to have access to formal credit in the formal lending institutions in Nigeria. So with where we stand, this is what we try to do, and this is why we have put this webinar together to be able to call our attention as borrowers to things that we need to be very careful about and things we need to pay attention to at this very trying period. But it's not just all about challenges. We know that when you have challenges like this, we also have a lot of opportunities for those who have the discernment to really see how they can take advantage of the opportunity. As we see around us in Nigeria, there are quite a lot of alternative forms of lending going on, peer-to-peer lending for crowdfunding initiatives. All of those initiatives are increasing day by day in Nigeria, and it's opportunity for businesses and borrowers or consumers generally to be able to find alternative ways by which they can really get access to credit. And also because of the situation that we are, those who have entrepreneurial ability, economic challenges notwithstanding, they are still able to look for opportunities based on a lot of things that the current government is doing to stimulate entrepreneurship, to stimulate business promotion, and to take advantage of the fact that there are so many windows that are opening up now to us in the economy. We only need to find a way to really embrace them, look for information around them, and see how we can take advantage of them. Now, what we have also seen because of the changes, the devaluation that has come in Nigeria, is the fact that a lot of Nigerians now resort to made in Nigerian products. And I think that's a good opportunity for us as business people. If a lot of people are now looking inward to patronize and purchase and demand for made in Nigerian product because of the change, because of the high cost of services that are imported or some products that are imported, then it creates a lot of opportunity for us as Nigerians who are business people to then also be able to respond to that by now making those products in fashion, in clothing, in food, and in so many other areas of things that we use on a day-to-day basis. And I think this is an opportunity for us. And so it presents also opportunity for those who have entrepreneurial acumen to begin to look at what do Nigerians now demand. Those who normally would have gone up to import, and they now have to rely on local products because those foreign imported items are beyond their reach as we speak. And of course, for those who have excess liquidity, it's also an opportunity to invest their funds. There is high interest rate now in government instruments like bonds and treasury bills. And I know that even fixed deposit rate have gone up because of the what we have seen in terms of the NPR that have really gone up. So these are where the opportunities are. Now, just to round up my presentation this morning to open up this webinar is to say that we should, as businesses and as individuals, this is time to embrace financial planning and budgeting seriously. This is a time to make sure that we plan our expenses, we track our expenses, we track our income, and we cut our coat according to the size of our clothes. We have to also find a way to begin to communicate with our lenders. If you have loans, it's opportunity. It's a time that if you think there's going to be anything that is going to happen, it's good to be very proactive in engaging our lenders. And if where that is possible, by that engagement, there could be a review of the terms and agreements relating to our obligations to those financial institutions. For us, as a credit bureau, I think this is time for you to keep on seriously monitoring your credit status. You can do that using various products and services we have. We have our CRC mobile on your phone. You can download the CRC mobile that can enable you to track your credit score, that can enable you to track your credit report. You also can place for credit monitor product like Icon Plus, which gives you opportunity for us to be sending you notifications on a monthly basis of your status so that you're not caught unawares. And that also gives you opportunity to be able to meet your obligations when they are due. So this is just my commitment to setting the context for our session this morning. I will leave the floor now. I don't want to talk so much about CRC. We are all familiar with who we are. We are the leading credit bureau in Nigeria, and we are supporting the lending and access to credit in Nigeria. So thank you so much, and once again, I welcome all of us to this webinar this morning. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir, for providing some insights as to what we should begin to think about within the next couple of weeks, within the next couple of months. There's so many questions that I have, and there are also so many questions that have been sent to us via various channels. But before we go into the questions, we would like to introduce Mr. Alebiosu to give us his presentation. You're welcome, sir.
Thank you, Managing Director, Chief Executive Officer of CRC Credit Bureau. Thank you, Peggy. And thank you, other directors and our participants. I'm sure you know, of course, you must have read that apart from being the chief risk officer and executive director in the First Bank, I'm also the chairman of CRC Credit Bureau. Let me disclose that upfront. The managing director of CRC, in his opening speech, has spoken widely. But let me say to you that we were taught when we were younger that at every point in time in our life, things have been challenging, but only the stronger ones survive. If I ask my mom that how much was cement when you were younger, maybe she would tell me it was 1 naira. And cement is whatever price today. And people will still build houses. Which means that in every difficult situation, they are with us. And so, how do you become winner in this tough macroeconomic environment? Interest rate is high. Interest rate is high. Things are tough. And the reality is that with the monetary policy adjustment, of course, just like what the MD said, there'll be credit rationing, practically speaking. So if there's going to be credit rationing, how do you ensure you win? In the 21st century, the most important factor of production is capital. I repeat, in the 21st century, the most important factor of production is capital. It's not land. So in this environment, let's assume you have access to credit in October last year, and you bought cement for 5,000. Today, that cement is about 9,000, if I'm not wrong. That's about 80% more profit anyway. So as you sell, you buy. As you sell, you buy. It means that because you have access to capital, you are able to increase your margin. Indeed, in an inflationary environment like this, a difficult environment like this, people that owns capital, people that have access to credit, they win big time. So even where some people are crying, opportunity for you will abound because you have access to credit to buy things. Even if businesses are failing, maybe because you have access to credit, you are able to buy some of those things for the cheap. Again, in an inflationary environment, you are better to hold assets. So you can just imagine somebody who bought land for the house last year before the currency devaluation. Today, that same property, that same thing, if the person is to buy it today, you are likely to buy it at least twice the price of last year, which means that by holding that asset, you have hedged against inflation. Whoever wants to buy that asset today will buy it twice the price you bought it last year because you have access to credit. So you can just imagine if you lock yourself out of credit circle because of default. So if you default on your obligation, under the law, banks are bound to report you to credit bureau, and so your credit rating or credit status will be damaged. And if your credit status is damaged, the law prevents lending institutions from granting further loans to you. which means that you have locked yourself out of capital. You've locked yourself out of access to financial empowerment. I'm sure you are aware that the federal government is rolling out consumer credit. And in doing that, federal government will also check either you have good credit status. They won't just give money and say, go take, even if you're a serial defaulter, go and take. Of course not. They will check your credit status. The banks will check your credit status. Apart from checking your NIN, your BVN, which will have shown actually who you are, government will check. So if the consumer credit that is coming out, if you want to participate in it, you want to benefit from the framework of the government, which is empowerment. Don't forget I said that the most important factor of production in the 21st century is capital. And that's what federal government is doing, trying to empower Nigerians economically in such a way that they can deploy that capital for productive endeavors. And you can see multiplier effect coming from that. Don't forget that the president, when he was campaigning, said that he wants to build consumer economy through consumer lending. And if you lock yourself out through bad credit or bad credit rating, you have locked yourself out of empowerment, because government will not give loan or empower defaulters. There's no way they're going to encourage bad behavior. So in your own interest and in preparation for your own empowerment, you have to ensure that you have sound credit rate to check your credit status, pay up your loans when you are holding them, so that you don't block the next access. For us, I'm a banker, I'm a lender, and there's so many variables we consider. Of course, because of regulation, we can't even lend to you if you are defaulting, if you have negative credit. And government will not participate in this consumer lending by government if you also have bad credit status, because there's nowhere in the world where lenders or government will give money to people who are already defaulting. And when you have this, the best way to win in a tough macroeconomic environment is not to borrow money for consumption. Mark my word. Don't borrow money to do wambe or to do social life. Borrow money for economic purpose. So I'm doing a business. I'm borrowing money to increase it. Not that my father died, I'm borrowing money to go and bury. I want to do something to go and do this one. My friends are going here. If I don't participate, it will be an issue. There's something like that. You have to borrow money for commercial business purposes, empowerment, in such a way that you will win. Mark my word. You can only win when you deploy your capital for economic purpose. Don't take a loan and divert something else and say you come back to it. The operating environment might stop you, might even move against you before you come back to it. So let's assume you borrowed money before to import raw materials for your factory, and you diverted it something else. Now exchange rate move against you. Before you come back, you can't buy that raw material anymore because you diverted your money somewhere else. So the purpose for which your loan has been approved, ensure that is what you are doing. Because if you move to new direction and things should move against you, you will default. And when you default, you've locked yourself out of the real economy, which I don't think it will be in anybody's interest to get locked out of the economy. I would say for now, that helps. But don't forget that as bad as things are, even if, I mean, I hear people are hungry, but if farmlands are not being cultivated, you can take money for a Greek and farm. Rain will fall, plant your maize, soya beans, sorghum, and there'll be food. You have to. So if you borrow money to farm, people are telling me that 1 spoon of gari is so much. You plant your cassava so that you can benefit from that economy. Oh, this thing of plantain is this. Go and plant your plantain. Your this thing, it will grow. You make money from that. Oh, if I go to the market, 1 tuber of yam is 5,000. Go and plant your own yam. If you borrow money for a Greek, ensure you plant your own yam, your plantain, your soya, your rice. Use it to plant and then to increase. If you are planting with 10,000 before, if you borrow 50,000 more, you can plant with 60,000. There can be massive food production that you can see. And because there's population to feed, there will always be buyers. People will always come to buy the rice. So it's important for all of us to have that productive mindset, and that when loans are granted, they are to increase production and ensure you keep your rate. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Alibioso. You.
Oh, frozen?
I also have quite a number of questions for you, and some questions are also coming through our various channels.
Okay.
But let's keep the question and answers to the session later on after the panel discussion. Thank you very much, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. At this juncture, I'd like to call on Mr. Akinsemi to please give us his insights.
Okay, good morning, ladies, gentlemen. The chairman of CRC, Mr. Alibiosu, who's also my namesake, the group CEO of CRC, Dr. Pokwala, who is more of my friend than my colleague in the lending industry. I'd want to thank everyone for joining this session, and I do sincerely look forward to a very interactive session. Peggy, are you putting up my slides, or should I just talk through them?
Which would you prefer, sir? Would you like me to put up your slides?
Well, yes, they've seen enough of my face now, so actually you could put up the slide now.
Okay,
at least they have an idea of what I look
minutes.
like.
Okay,
Yep.
Please just give me a few minutes.
Okay. Well, I could start talking through it while Peggy puts it up. It's the lending space at this time is very interesting, and it's very interesting from so many dimensions, as mentioned first by Dr. Pokwala and also Mr. Alibiosu. There are so many fundamental issues that are driving the behavior of an average Nigerian. There are so many reasons that are, or factors that are driving the behavior of lenders. And the same way too, there's so many things or factors that are driving the behavior of companies and institutions that are being affected with growth. So I just want to look at some of them. Please forgive me, there might be some repetition of what has been spoken about. Now, I'm looking at the realities, and I'm looking at it in 4 perspectives. First is the rise in inflation. Inflation is a major factor, and it determines a lot of the behavioral tendencies of people, of the economy, and of course, other factors around it. And what has driven inflation for Nigeria is the removal of the fuel subsidy, which I think was delayed and has caused a lot of disruption to a lot of businesses and a lot of homes. Second, naturally, is the devaluation of the foreign currency. I believe Dr. Popola and Mr. Alibishu alluded to the fact that you're buying something today and tomorrow prices has changed. And generally, the cost of everything has gone up. You can see the graph of inflation and, of course, our GDP growth. And that shows, and these has major implications. One, on the increased cost of doing business for an average person, the limit on expansion plans in terms of projects that you can carry on. Because the truth is that if you needed ₦1 billion to do a business last year, you probably will be needing about 2.5 to 3 billion to do it this year. So you'd ask yourself, is it worth doing that growth? And the reality is that you might not be able to pass this cost on to the customer. And of course, the third is pressure on pricing. It is difficult to price. It's almost impossible now to buy the things you used to buy last year, because you're actually thinking, is this worth my while? Is this critical to my success? The next factor is the rise in cost of living. Of course, everything has gone up, like we've mentioned. There's food inflation, petrol is there. To go and come back from Abuja now by air is probably going to cost you maybe about 200, 250,000 for an economy class ticket and $500,000 for a business class ticket. Even as simple as also your cooking gas. Everything is gone up. And of course, in terms of the rising cost of living, it's also the impact is the cost of doing business, the high tendency for loan default, which is why we're discussing today, and more pressure on recoveries, because the truth is that people will be spending more time focusing on recoveries to even create liquidity as against going to look for money to actually lend more. And of course, the overall impact is very, very negative. Next slide, please. The third is the growing retail industry, the finance industry. We have a lot of finance companies now regulated by central bank. But what should be worrying more about, really, as we've discussed in several fora, is the fact that there are a lot of informal finance companies who probably would account for a lot more than the formal ones that are regulated. So you have a lot of players outside the system who are not reportable and accountable to anyone. And as a result of that, it is difficult to aggregate data in terms of what people are borrowing, what people are repaying, how people are behaving, and a lot more in terms of ensuring that the industry, the retail finance industry, is sanitized. Then the fourth issue is the dilemma in terms of NPL. Non-performing loans has been a major issue to practically every lender, whether in all the tiers of the financial services sector, from the banking sector, which is the deposit money banks, to the microfinance banks, to the finance companies, to even the mortgage banks too. Everybody's getting a hit of it. And the unfortunate thing is you're getting a hit of it on both sides of your balance sheet. You're getting a hit of it on your asset side because the quality of the loans are depreciating. And you are getting a hit of it from the liability side because even your supposed depositors and borrowers, they are having to actually utilize their deposits for consumption because there is actually little cash flow coming into them. So we need to emphasize the issue of quality of loans. We need to strengthen our risk criteria. And of course, demand for loan will definitely increase. And like Mr. Alibishu said, increase in terms of demand for loans for consumption. That's what you find because people are focusing on survival. So it's not about luxuries now, it's about survival. I'll take you through a few points. Next slide, please. I'll take you through a few points that are very basic, rudimental, and these are things that we are faced with. Now, the strategies for mitigating credit risks here, particularly from the lender's perspective. Some of my points are to the borrower's perspective too. But from the lender's perspective, one, the dynamics of industries and sectors, they differ from sector to sector. So we need to look at portfolio limits. So if we're a lender, we must ensure that we avoid excessive buildup of correlated exposures. So if we're singularly focusing on a particular sector, we'd find that if there's a negative impact on just that sector, then our whole loan book is in trouble. So we need to tighten our portfolio, define first the portfolio limits for each of the sectors or segments you're playing in. And if you do that, you'll be protected and insulated to an extent when there's a crisis. Secondly, we need to be sensitivity to customer sentiment. And this is talking about relationship. A lot of times borrowers tend to be very insensitive to what is happening with their customers, and they don't even understand what customers are going through. And it is only where you are there for them and you're able to provide that, I would say, comfort. And this is in two sides. On one side when you are lending, and on the other side when you are recovering, because the strategy must remain the same. So as much as possible, you must not compromise standards to win a business, because the minute you compromise in any way, you find that you get into trouble. Now, my experience in banking, I did banking for 22 years, and in running the operations of a very large bank, one of the things I realized is that the minute you compromise on the account opening process of a relationship, one way or the other down the line, the business or the relationship would turn sour. So you have to ensure you avoid compromise. The third is the use of alternative data. Now, what I mean by this is that conventional times require conventional decisions or behavior. Unconventional times require unconventional behavior. So you need to start focusing strongly in terms of your risk assessment, in terms of your recovery, on factors that are very, very critical to survival. So focusing on willingness to pay, and even strongly more on character over and above capacity. So what I'm saying in simple English is that you need to go back to your risk acceptance criteria. You need to pay a lot more attention to it and start asking yourself, what is important now as we're going in? It's not about the person's salary or supposed capacity. It is about his willingness to behave well. And the same also goes for when we're talking about recovery too. So you need to look at that. And I talked about skip tracing. Skip tracing should be done whether you are borrowing, at the point of borrowing and at the point of recovery, because you need to be able to trace people. If you don't know and understand a customer well, do not give a loan to him. So you are better off having your money in your bank, and even if you are not earning interest, at least you can see it. But lending without understanding the customer has serious implications. Then we need to go back to the basics, the principles of credit. You know, we always at one point or the other, we all learned about those 5 C's of credit. We talked about character, capacity, capital. I believe Mr. Alebi should emphasize that, collateral, and the conditions. We need to go back to those 5 C's and ask ourselves, do we have a risk-based rating which ensures that we're able to score customers in accordance with their credit level? So, or do we do sentimental lending, where we look at it and we say, oh, this person looks like, or my gut feeling. Gut feelings, seriously, sometimes don't work when it comes to a situation where you have an economic downturn. Now, the next one is, this next slide, yes, thank you. Educate your workforce on what to look out for. A lot of times, the impact of our colleagues in the institution makes a difference. So we must communicate with our relationship managers. We must make understand what is happening in terms of the trends that are not visible on financial reports. So if you're lending to an SME, it is not what, when I was growing up in banking, sometimes some people say what you see is not what you get. So do not be deceived at what you see. You need to look for those things that are not visible, but can only be looked at with a different eye. So you need to identify those things. You need to have more frequent sessions with your relationship managers to review challenges and solutions. And you'll be shocked where ideas in terms of growth would come from. The next thing is paying attention to liquidity. You know, liquidity is the king. There is no institution in the world that has gone into oblivion as a result of excess liquidity. It's lack of liquidity that kills institutions. So you need to secure adequate liquidity to manage the drawings that would occur as a result of failure of receiving repayments from customers. So you must have liquidity to ensure that you are able to continue to grow as a going concern. Then, of course, for those that are regulated by a regulator, be it central bank or whatever, you need to look at your regulatory framework, and you need to look at it through credit assessment. What does the regulator say? Stress testing, capital adequacy measures, compliance in terms of ensuring you are maintaining a very good financial position. They're looking at NPLs, and all these things the regulator does in trying to ensure that as much as possible, the likelihood of excessive credit risk is reduced. So for us, for instance, at Page Financials, we have central bank going through an annual, we just completed our annual review session with central bank, and we go through that annually. So it keeps us on our toes, and it ensures that as much as possible, all our processes are adequately and properly aligned with whatever the regulator says and dictates. I would also want to make a point that it's important that we also pay a lot of attention to the credit bureau. We have been using credit bureaus from inception, and of course we've been a customer of CRC since inception, and I can tell you the value that as a lender you get from ensuring you get credit bureau data. And the data goes over and above, oh, this is what the person is owing, this is how long he's been owing. You know, there is so much data sitting there in terms of how to behave. And the more people, lenders join and ensure they send returns, the more we can actually sanitize the institution. Now, another point is also what, I'll just amplify what Mr. Alibishu mentioned, and that is borrowing money for different purposes. Now, what would happen conventionally? You should not be borrowing money for consumption. You should not be borrowing money to feed. You should be borrowing money for value-adding investments that would increase your portfolio as against borrowing money to feed. But it's so ridiculous. And again, some things are so cultural here. You'll be shocked that people are borrowing money to actually throw parties in anticipation that the envelopes and the checks that they get and the money they are sprayed from those parties would be what would service those loans. And some people are actually borrowing their money. So again, we need to align reality with our culture. And of course, it comes back to ensuring that we behave appropriately. There's also something we should also consider as a borrower, and that is to always think about reputational and generational damage to our brand. Every individual is a brand. You are a brand because, whatever the case may be, even if you're bearing the same name, you have a separate DNA. So we have a brand to protect, and we should do everything to protect it, because the reputational and the generational damage is monumental. We take these things for granted until something happens. So we need to pay a lot more attention to these things. Now, there's also need for us as individuals, borrowers, and also even as institutions to focus on substitutes. And I'll use an example. I went into a pharmacy a couple of days ago, and I wanted to buy vitamin C, the soluble one. And I picked 2 of them, and I picked another item with it. And I got to the counter and I gave it to the cashier. And they scanned it and they said, "Oh, your bill is 30-something thousand." And I said, "Wow, when did this other item that I picked, when did it go up, or how much is it?" And the lady said, "No, it is actually the vitamin C. I picked 2 of them. That the vitamin C, a 20 capsule soluble vitamin C is actually 11,000. And the 2 I picked, I looked at them and I asked myself, is there a substitute for even this vitamin C? Maybe they said vitamin C comes from orange. I dropped the vitamin C tablets, and I said, well, I might as well just drink oranges. And if I don't think I'll buy 22,000 naira worth of orange to finish the month. So I'm saying that everything in life has a substitute, and you must pursue the substitutes. Because seriously, with the reality that we're faced with now, for instance, institutions now switch off generators at 5 or at 6 to ensure that they are able to conserve diesel. There is always an option for every decision we're taking. Now, the final point is that you must always put your appropriate foot forward. Now, it is not your best foot that you are putting forward, it's the appropriate foot. Because the truth is that with the dynamics of the economic realities we're faced with in this environment, it is not necessarily that the strategist is the one that will come up with the best solution. It is not necessarily that the best salesperson will be the one that will take us or that would improve our sales position in this period, because you have to be very, very open. So it's the person that produces the appropriate result that would match your reality that would actually move the institution forward. Final slide is just a summary of what I've gone through. So in conclusion, effective credit risk management in these challenging economic times requires a combination of proactive measures, and I would also use the word pre-active measures, because we have an opportunity to really define the future we want. So robust risk assessments, frameworks, and a willingness to adopt strategies and policies as circumstances evolve. The dynamics of circumstances evolving is almost on a daily basis. And this strategic approach not only safeguards you as an institution or a borrower, but also ensures the continued support and trust of your customers. And this is what will define the future of an institution or an individual. On that note, I want to say thank you to CRC for inviting me, and I'll be happy to take questions at the appropriate time. Thank you very much. Back to you, Peggy.
Thank you very much, Mr. Akintemi. I mean, you've said some wonderful things here today. I like the fact that you said it is the appropriate foot forward and not the best foot forward. I like the fact that you also highlighted several things that lenders can do to ensure that, you know, they lend to the right people, because as you know, part of the audience that we have today are also lenders, SMEs, companies who generally provide goods and services on credit. So a lot of the tips that you have given would help them. Thank you so much for your presentation and sharing your insights. I'd like to ask that everyone begin to put their questions and answers in the box. After the panel session, we will delve straight into the Q&A. We have over 200 people that are following us right now on Facebook and YouTube, because we're streaming live, and they have also graciously started sending in their questions. And so at this point, I'd like to request that all our speakers come in for the panel session. Thank you very much. And so we've talked about a lot of things today. And, there are some, challenges that all borrowers tend to face, whether they're, businesses or whether they're individuals. And we've talked about different ways that they can manage their credit. But for businesses, when their customers are not paying, what tips can we give them to begin to bring those monies in to stimulate their business, especially now in the environments where we find ourselves, where people are borrowing to consume rather than for business? So, Mr. Akintemi, I don't know whether you can give us some pointers as to what businesses can do in this regard.
Thank you very much. It's a very, very tough one, and a hard pill to swallow. But there will be two sides to it. One side as to how businesses themselves should behave as a business, and how they should react to borrowers. One of the starting point is to look at the person's capacity to pay, to repay. Now, what I've realized with Nigerian debtors or Nigerian borrowers is that, particularly when you get into that debt mode, is that you'll be shocked that there's some percentage of people that have the capacity to pay. And if you noticed, I talked about earlier that you must pay a bit more attention to people that have the capacity. Some people have the capacity to pay, but they just feel it isn't priority to them. And I talked about willingness earlier. So you need to first define with borrowers which ones are willing to pay, which ones aren't willing to pay, and you categorize them. Now, the ones that are willing to pay, you need to now look at what their capacity to pay is. So willingness has to be the starting point. And the way you would behave with them is totally different from the way you would behave with the ones that don't have the willingness. Look, we've had cause to go to a debtor's place before. And when we got there, we realized that the children of this debtor hadn't eaten for a whole day. So you look at that situation, and my colleagues had to dip their hands in the pocket to give money to the children. But the funny thing, the guy has the willingness, but he couldn't just afford it. But guess what? The guy got a job weeks after, and tomorrow he doesn't forget pitch. He has paid down his loan, and by God's grace, he's now giving us deposits, however small. But you have to be able to support customers. Now, there's this other category of those that are not willing to pay. And the truth is that for as long as we did not, and I tell my colleagues, we are not doing money laundering for anybody. And as such, we are not willing to throw away money. We have depositors who have trusted us. We have investors, shareholders who have invested in you. So you need to be able to take a bit of aggressive steps. So the ones that are not willing to pay, you have to get aggressive. And aggressive meaning you need to, I don't believe in social media, bad mouthing and all those things. I don't, because if you pursue those channels, they'll come back to haunt you. So focus on very legitimate way of pursuing it. Go back to your contract. Are there things that are in the contract that you should have met? Document it to them. Maybe talk to people around them. Moral suasion, approach, and it helps on that side. Now, coming to the institution too, how to behave, because the reality is that a lot of institutions are illiquid today. And the reason why they are illiquid is because the people that they have lent to are not paying. So how do you ensure that you conserve your liquidity? Now, the general thing institutions do in terms of distress slash salary, is to sack people, is to do all those things. But there are a lot of other things, which is why I said earlier that if you have been very careful with distribution or redistribution of your portfolio to ensure it's diverse. We talk about the COVID period, and that was a clear example of understanding people that were diverse. So during the COVID period, the fast foods were, I won't name names, but there's one in Victoria Island that said he made much more. He made about 2-3 times in terms of distribution of his food during COVID period. So it was when COVID finished that his turnover went down. He wasn't happy. But I'm saying that the medical area, the fast food, they were making money. So there are always opportunities in terms of recession. But until we start looking at things with a different eye and not the conventional eye. I hope that helps a bit.
Yes, it does. It helps a lot. And I totally agree with you where you say that there are so many opportunities out there. People just have to do a bit more research and find out, which of the opportunities that they want to pursue. But Dr. Popola, we tend to think that credit bureaus are really just for lenders. Is this the truth? Can I, as an individual, how can I benefit from even using the credit bureau? I mean, is it important to me? We know that in a lot of countries, especially in Europe, America, you really cannot do anything without credit. But that is not the case in Nigeria. So, I mean, what do you think? How do you think it will benefit me as an individual or benefit individuals, especially during this economic downturn?
All right, thank you so much, Peggy. Thanks the other two speakers for the insights you have brought to this conversation this morning. So credit bureau is beyond just for, lenders or for those who give cash as credit. What's a credit bureau? It's a database of warehouses information. And the set of information that we have basically around 4 categories. There's what we call the demographic or the firmographic information, which talks around who you are, where you live, when you were born, what kind of means of identification do you have, and all of that. And if you're a company, it talks around your name, your RC number, your addresses, and all of that. Now, before we have a second category of information, which talks around credits. And credit in this case is just not about, cash credit you have taken from financial institutions. There are quite a lot of institutions who who sell on credit. And as far as they are concerned, they have advanced you credit. So such information is also available. So big multinationals, big, large organizations, large companies, and a lot of other small ones that sell on credit, and people hold on to their money. They have gone away with their goods or services, but they have refused to pay. All those information are also in the credit bureau. Even organizations like telcos, consuming telephone and then not paying, especially for those who are postpaid service users. Discos like the 9 disco companies we have, you consume electricity and you have not paid. Rental services, you have, you are living in a house that is rented and you have not paid, or maybe you pay your rent, but you have not paid the service charge, And then there are those who do it for employment purposes. In fact, factually, all financial institutions today, they do searches on all employees before they are finally confirmed or before they are even employed. And it's compulsory also for directors of most institutions if you want to become a director. So most times they do that search on you. And so where we stand is that a bureau is much more than, a vehicle or a database or an institution that's just for lenders. It's all come to our character and the kind of information that the Bureau has is much more than that. And if, for instance, if you have, there's a section that talks around litigation against you. There's a section of the information that talks around, return checks. If you have been throwing checks around and you have not, your checks are being returned, you have custody of all those kind of information, because it all text to your character as individuals, as businesses. And of course, searches are conducted to see how frequent do you go around looking for, shopping for credit. So in all of these cases, it's just not about lenders, and it's not just about cash credit, as it were. It's also about checking your character. It's sometimes talking about your identity. Sometimes you're just checking about your location, where you live. Sometimes you're just talking about even your other information you give out to people, and how responsible are you being in giving correct information. So we have information, all of that, and a lot of institutions use us for that purpose. And that's why more often than not, even as individuals, as businesses, we want you to conduct your search, because nowadays you have a lot of identity theft going on there. People assuming somebody's identity to borrow, and then you don't know. And if you don't know, what happens is that when you now need to borrow, or when somebody needs to conduct a search on you, they realize that certain transactions are being on your file, and you are not able to get that transaction done. So that's another phase to look at. You've rented a place, and you have conducted yourself in such a way that the landlord has dragged you to court, and that case is in court. And the landlord, who probably is an institution, has submitted your data and said the case in court. Now, when a Page Financial or a First Bank want to give you loan, when you do apply to them, they discover that you have been fighting somebody on account of loan repayment and it's dragged you to court. So that litigation information is on your file, and it counts negatively against you. So some of these issues are things that you find about individuals and about businesses in our database. And so we always encourage everyone to now conduct their own searches of themselves, just like normal going to the hospital and say, I want to do a medical check. I want to see whether there are kidney issues or liver issues or prostate issues or something. That same way, you want to see what is it that is in my name in that database that is so huge. Who have submitted information about me? What have they submitted about me? Sometimes you find something very funny. Sometimes you find something very strange. Sometimes you find something that's not for you, but maybe as an error from those financial institutions. And that's the beauty of trying to conduct that searches on you. Sometimes you are a director of a business. You are not borrowing, but you are a director of a company that wants to borrow. But you have had issues with your own information. And so you are denying that company the opportunity to borrow, because once there are 4 or 5 directors and one of them has difficulty or has challenges with the credit report, then that institution will not be able to borrow until you sort that out. And like I said, it may not just be for you that you are exposed. There may be some other information out there that you need to clean up. Sometimes it's you have acted as a guarantor to somebody innocently. Oh yes, I want to take a loan. Go and bring a guarantor, and then they check, and then you have gone. Then the person has defaulted. You don't have problem with your own credit history, but then when they check, they will note that you have guaranteed someone who has defaulted, and so that is noted against you. And these are part of the reasons why you just have to keep on checking yourself from time to time. Interestingly, the law says that you can check yourself free of charge once in a year from any of the bureaus. So that provides that opportunity. But there are so many other things you can do, like I've explained in my presentation, to say, why don't you just enroll with the credit bureau and say, every month, send me my status? Okay. Why can't you download the CRC app, CRC mobile, either on Android or iOS, depending on the phone you are using? And then at any point in time, while you're in your car or you're in your home, you can just check out yourself to see that you're fine and you're okay. My experience is that every day we see people write us, even some come to our offices complaining that there are issues with their credit report. And they know that only when they have applied and it has become critical for them to get a loan, and they are unable to get that loan simply because something has happened and it's taking a lot of time for them to clean them up or to even discuss it with the lender or with whoever has submitted the information about them. I think there are just a few things I want to say about that.
Thank you very much, Dr. Popola. From everything you've said here today, I understand that there are quite a number of information that is in my credit report. So I would then surmise that as part of that information, it will be things like interest rates on the loans that I have taken. Am I correct?
Yes, so that will be there. The amount of money you have taken will be there. Your repayments, as you pay from time to time, will be there. And this is one area that I also want to, at this particular time, that I want to talk to borrowers generally, because a lot of us have covenant and conditions and terms that say we should pay up our loan at specific period of time. Now, if you don't pay on those days, let's say you are supposed to pay on the 25th of every month, and now you are allowing it to go into 38th of the month or go into the next month, you would think those things are not important. So if you are defaulted 1 week, few days, and so on and so forth, all of those count against your credit score, and it brings a legend of yellow into your credit report. Yellow means amber. It means one. It's a warning signal to the lenders to say, be careful, this person is not green. They see it just at a glance, green, amber, red. So if you defaulted, it's not that you don't pay, but you pay late than the agreed time that you have extended. I agree with the lender. It will still show and it still counts against you. And nowadays we have quite a number of lenders who just use credit scoring to determine whether they are giving a loan, and such factors, such information have been factored into what eventually becomes your credit score, and it's always negative. So that's it.
Thank you. So which leads me to asking Mr. Alebiosu. So if, for example, the interest rate for my loan is 23%, and interest rates go down, can I, as a consumer, approach my bank to say, I would like to renegotiate my interest rates? Or at a second, or at a time where my credit score is high, can I approach a financial institution with my excellent credit score and say, based on my credit score, I want to renegotiate the terms? Is this possible? Okay, so I will take that question again.
Thank you, Peggy.
Okay.
If you contracted your loan during the high interest rate, and now interest rate has gone down, you can approach your bank and say, I want my interest rate reduced, rate has come down. Indeed, on their own, they will even advise you. Because if they don't, they are also afraid that other banks might even offer you lower rate and you will move. So in their own interest, they will do it. Again, if your rate was high because of your not too good credit rating, if your credit rating has improved, of course, on their scoring grid, it will show that you are low risk, which means that your pricing will have to come down. It will also review it for you. And that's why I said at the beginning that protect your credit rating, because it's everything about you. Just like somebody who is said to have what will you call it now? Have an illness, and they say because of this illness, we're not sure this guy with this. But after 6 months of observing, the person looks like Ben Johnson, like around 100 meters, and they've checked. Oh, everybody was so they put him for Olympic, and that's it. It's exactly the same. So watch your credit rate. is very important. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. So just one more question. So conversely, does that then also mean that now that we are in an economic downturn, and banks are increasing their lending rate, so would the banks also contact us to say, well, based on the current economic downturn, your rates have been reviewed upwards?
Yes. In fact, it's regulatory. It's part of consumer protection, actually. And it's also part of bankers' tariff. You must even give notice before you increase. You must inform the customer. Yes, you must tell the customer, rate has gone up, but so and so date, I will be taking up your interest rate. So we will. You have to inform them.
What about
either by email? What about channels that they have? Either by email, by letter, even by phone. If I can send SMS to you to inform you, to say, oh, rate will be going up so and so date, because of ABCD, and that's fine.
And this is for all forms of credit, so inclusive of mortgages, credit cards.
Everybody, you get your notification because you're a borrower.
I see. Thank you very much. But Mr. Akintemi, is this also the situation for your institution?
We would differ a bit from the deposit money banks. The MPC met last week. They increased the MPR by 400 basis points. And by Monday morning at our EXCO meeting, I was presented with a letter from our biggest lender, from our biggest banker, that the lending rates has gone up effective immediately from 20-something to 30-something. And I found this a bit ridiculous. I don't do that with my customers. We tend to, yes, we try to apply the MPR plus, but at the same time too, we don't, yes, we can do it, but because we lend more to individuals, again, it's also about understanding your customers. If you are in a distressed situation and your priority would be to increase the rates, I can assure you, you might be losing the capital in the process. So you have to be very, very careful. And it's not just about being scientific. You just have to be real. And the fundamentals are so important. So I can increase my rates for people borrowing going forward. But again, for those that I have a contract with, I could play around with time. Now, I appreciate the position of the banks because a lot of them are long-term loans, and maybe ours are shorter tenured, 6 to 9 months, 1 year, thereabout. But again, you still have to be very, very careful because people that are struggling to make the payments today with a low rate, and you now increase the rates, I can assure you, you are building the castle of bad loans. So you need to be very, very careful. And, don't forget that we are being hit on both sides because, like I said, the same way the banks have written that, 400 basis points, the depositors too are also saying, they want an increase in their rates. Now, where you don't respond on time, some of them will just liquidate their deposit and take it away. And we see a lot of that happening in the last 1 or 2 weeks. So it's about you ensuring that you're also able to respond to them, and ensure that as much as possible, you adjust the rates. Now, the reality we are faced with is that our margins are thinning out. And that's the reality. But you are better off with a thinned out margin than having increased NPLs. So you have to actually weigh the balance, and is the balance of what the deposit money banks do, which is liquidity versus profitability. So it's about striking the balance and knowing which of the levers to pull and what time to pull it.
And do you also think that, even today, even with the economic downturn, that technology has a role to play in easing people's ability to borrow?
Technology has a role to play on two sides. Yes, ability to borrow to the extent that you would revise some conditions that technology can bridge the gap for you to reduce the cost of overheads. Now, let me make this point. In the last 10 to 15 years, in the consumer borrowing has changed. Conventionally, an average Nigerian does not want to discuss debt with an individual out of arrogance. But what has happened is that we have, and when I say we now, those of us that are lending in this space, have evolved a way of ensuring this is thrown open to the extent that we're advertising, come and take a loan. This was never happening before. So that reality is now leading us to a point where we're trying to also refine the way people borrow. So technology, yes, has an impact on that. But technology is also helping us to actually trace debtors. I'm sure we all know and understand the damage Japa has caused to us. And for people like us, Japa has caused damage both on our own staff side, then our borrower side. People would come to you on a Wednesday, apply for a loan. Thursday, you look at everything perfect based on the requirements. They get the loan on Thursday. And on Friday, they resign their appointment where they are working, and their flight is Saturday morning on Virgin to London. And this happens every day. Technology cannot catch it. So there are some things that technology would not be able to do. So of course, even in recovery too, these people disappear, and maybe if you are lucky, you'll be able to trace them with WhatsApp. So that's how you now introduce what they call skip tracing, which I mentioned earlier. So you need to be able to trace the people. And social media, there's no one on earth that can disappear. There's something you can always use to trace, which is why we've been saying, well, we are hoping we'll be able to take the discussions further with CRC about actually partnering with some foreign credit bureaus such that we can actually trace people around the world. So, but is a reality, yes, technology would add value, but yes, to some extent.
Thank you. I mean, it's interesting, all the the things that you've said about how technology can help, but at the same time, it's also very important for us to understand that the basics are still very important. Now, Dr. Popola, recently, the Punch newspaper came out and said that the Manufacturers Association of Nigeria has said that 767 manufacturers have shut down their operations, while 335 became distressed in 2023. And a part of what was listed in the Punch newspaper was that this came as a backdrop of exchange rate volatility, rising inflation, and other economic challenges that have worsened the investment climate. Now, do you have any words of advice for these manufacturing companies? How can they use the credit bureaus to better their business or to better their loss?
Well, thank you so much. I think it's a very challenging time. Just have demonstrated in my presentation, and Mr. Akintemi also have shown that graph. We see rising inflation, which as of January has gone to 29.9. I'll be surprised if that's not past 30% if we by the time the February position is shown to us. And it's not going to abate soon, because you see the NPR also moving to the rate it has moved by the meeting that was had last year. And of course, you also see the exchange rates now officially around 1,500 naira to $1 officially. So is not yet to guru, just to use that concept for all of us, including those manufacturing companies you mentioned. So what can be done? So there is like you can't close shop. I won't encourage anybody to close shop because it's a cyclical position. We know that this time will reverse itself sooner than later, depending on all the policies and actions that government has taken. So you have to, it may be interesting for them to renegotiate a lot of their loans because most manufacturing companies actually do borrow, but more often than not, they borrow long term to acquire assets. Some borrow for working capital and so on and so forth. For those that are long term in nature, I think there's need for we'll encourage them to renegotiate the terms to make it probably longer. That way, default will be avoided. It will not adversely affect their credit opportunity to borrow anymore in the system. Secondly, is to look at the kind of the products that they sell. Maybe some of them are like me. It's very difficult for me to increase my price. It's so difficult because price is very just inelastic. You can't just increase prices because everybody tells you that they are also managing costs. They are trying to look for ways to reduce their costs and manage their expenses. And your own number is also one of those they put on the product owner to manage it. But you can look at your market much more critically and much more strategically and see what can you do. And I made allusion to that some of them are repackaging their products. So even ordinary soap that we use to bath now, you see that it's thinner now than it used to be. Because they want to give you that psychological feeling that they are not increasing prices. But the quantum of what they are selling to you, so soap that you can use for 1 week, now use it for 4 days. And but psychologically, you have that, they have not increased their price. So some of them engage in something like that. Some try to look for other strategies to ensure that they engage the market in such a way that they don't lose out. So I think that is that. The other issue that is driving issues around manufacturing is actually energy costs. 2 weeks ago, yes, in the morning, I signed a voucher for this one at 1,350. 9 a.m. In the evening, 6 p.m., they brought another voucher. It's 1,450. It has gone by 100 that same day. That's the real situation that we find ourselves today. So, and part of what I've learned, and I think Mr. Alebiosu spoke to that, is that whatever you have to buy them now. Whatever things you need to that are very important as raw materials, as whatever, you have to incur those costs and have them, because the next time you are going to have a replacement for them, you can almost be sure that it will be at higher price for you. So I think that is also that. The third one is as probably the more you can look inward for alternative materials for your production, the better. Because some items you can actually have substitution for them. Rather than importing them, you can use local materials. Those local materials will relatively be cheaper, even though we know that even those who don't have anything to do with FX will tell you it's FX. And they will increase the prices. Everybody's making reference to FX. Even those who are selling fruits, they will tell you it's FX. But the situation that they can leverage on is to see what more can they use locally, what more of their materials can they use locally, what more of the things they need to use can they use locally. Now, for instance, people are doing solar energy rather than relying on diesel or even the electricity of the government. So that way, it's a sunk cost. It may be expensive to put in that, but it's an asset. So it's not an item, an expense item that you just expense in a month or two. It's there for a long time, and so you can always take advantage of that. So I think those are just few things that come to me straight away in all of this.
Thank you very much. Mr. Libosu, are there any regulatory or compliance considerations that borrowers need to keep in mind when managing credits to avoid defaults? Is there anything regulatory they need to keep in mind? Or is it regulation just purely for the banks?
Well, no. Mr. Popola spoke about this before. You know, if you're a borrower, you must keep your credit rating. If your credit rating is bad, the law says you should not get money. So you will not get money. If you issue dot check, there are rules. A certain number, the law says you will be banned from holding check for some number of years. So, and where we sit as lenders, once you have 3 dot checks in your account, you will not get caught. There's no way, because it just shows that you don't honor your obligation. There's no other way. You issue check that you did not pay, and you want me to believe that you will pay my own when you give me your own check. How am I going to believe that? So that also will limit you. Don't give guarantee to someone you don't know. Because if you give guarantee, they call that guarantee to be against you if you don't pay. And if you don't pay, it will affect your credit. Also know that if you are owing NEPA or your disco, your electricity distribution company, and they put your name on credit bureau, you have destroyed your rates. If you are owing your landlord, if your landlord subscribe to credit bureau and put your name, nobody will want to give you another house, leave. And no bank want to give you loan. If you cannot pay your landlord, why will I believe that you will pay back my loan? So these are realities that people need to know. I repeat, the most important factor of production in 21st century is capital. Once you get yourself locked out of capital, chances that you will be able to tap into the business environment and flourish, the chances are slim, because you need money to buy things. So if you sell the market, you need money to buy things to sell. So if what you sell is 2 crates of Coke, your profit will be limited to 2 crates of Coke. If you're able to borrow money to buy 50 crates of Coke, you will have profit from 50 crates of Coke. So the person that has access to capital, that can buy 50 crates of Coke, of course will be prosperous than somebody who was able to buy 2 crates of Coke. It's simple economics. So don't lock yourself out of prosperity. Thank you.
Thank you. And you know, this now takes me, Mr. Libosu, to a question that came from one of our social media channels. And the question is for you. And it says, when
really?
a bank customer, yes, when a bank customer has redeemed, because you mentioned dot check, when a bank customer has redeemed a dot check issued in error, what are the steps for taking him off your register?
Okay. Now, it's not my register actually more. It's CRC, because if you say it's already with CRC. So now you issue a dot check. The bank has reported you for issuing dot check. It might not be First Bank. You might have issued through another bank, and they've all reported you to CRC. So what process will you take to say, oh, see, the CRC will not admit that you made it in error because it was reported to CRC by another bank. So when you go to the bank and you explain to the bank the process or what you have done, generally when you write that kind of thing to me and say, oh, I issue checks to my suppliers and already told them not to present because I knew I'll be traveling, or I knew I was ill, I knew something happened, and I've written to them, and there's evidence that you wrote to them, and they acknowledge your letter. So it's not just to say you wrote to them, and there's no evidence that you wrote to them, or that you told them not to present, and they still went ahead and presented. You know, it's difficult to confirm oral evidence. So there must be evidence that you did that. If you have evidence that you wrote to them, and they still went ahead and presented the checks, I will attach that letter you wrote to them that they acknowledge. I will now ask you to write your own letter, Director, Central Bank. And then we will now write our own letter explaining to Central Bank that, see, this person, before the check was presented, actually wrote that this should not be presented. It was acknowledged, and those guys still went ahead to present. And these are the circumstances that led to it. And subsequently, the checks have been paid, but these are the issues. Please authorize me to also not be penalized, because there's penalty against me if I don't act, because it's the law. So Central Bank must tell me they will not penalize me if I take you out of it, because I've seen it. So I have to inform them before I even go ahead. So I will inform Central Bank, I'm doing this. These are the reasons. These are the papers. These are this thing. And after that, I can take you out, because there's regulation. I'm a bank. I'm under regulation. So the government has said A, B, C, D. We don't want this kind of thing in our system. This is what you should do. We should freeze the account. So that when CBN examiners come to my bank and say, but this customer has done 5 dot checks, why was the account not? Why do you still have this thing? Why have you not retrieved your checkbook from him? Why this? Why that? I will say, sorry, this is it. This is his letter. This is the letter he wrote to supplier. These are circumstances. These are, I mean, we're all human beings. They will look at it and they'll clear me. But it is your own interest. This era of digital banking, where you can transfer money to customers, to suppliers, and all those things. Because you don't see, if you do dot checks and the checks are back, you can be accused of obtaining credit under pretense. You can be accused of obtaining goods under pretense, and you cannot dance out of it. Truly. So that's why it's important that we all get it right. Thank you.
Thank you. I have 2 questions for Mr. Kinsemi. The first one is, what is your stance on overdue charges for defaulters on a daily basis, as high as 2,000 Naira incurred daily, knowing that there could be a reason? That's the first question that came across our social media. The second question is, can we let go of any of the C's in credit?
Okay, overdue charges and letting go of the C, any of the C's. Now, overdue charges are meant to be penalties that result from default. And the way a lender would look at it is the fact that I've taken this money as a deposit from someone. So I am paying that person interest on a daily basis, whether or not the person I lent it to is paying or not. So that is the starting point. So when institutions have charges, which is what we call penalty charges, those penalty charges are traceable to the fact that we have taken this money from somewhere else, and there is an opportunity cost to that money. Now, again, I keep talking about relationship. You know, everything is about relationship with your customers. And if you feel you cannot develop a relationship with the customers, don't even start it, because that is where problems come. Now, you could look at a situation and see that, oh, clearly this is not as a result of the person's situation. People lose their job. So many things happen. We, the lender, sometimes we introduce insurance to at least ensure that they are still able, we are covered to an extent. But in some situation where they actually have the capacity to pay, or where you realize that you have some form of security that cushions your ability to earn those fees, you have a right to take it. But where you see situations where there is no way they can pay. Now, this is why CBN did it so well. And they said that with finance companies and deposit money banks, you can give a 90-day window. Not that you won't charge, but a 90-day window before a loan is classified as whether doubtful, substandard, doubtful, before it gets lost. So within that 90-day window, you are expected to at least make do with your integrity before they now start charging some overdue charges. But within that 90-day period, you should actually be responsible enough to pay your interest. So I think it's important we understand the concept. But there is no, yes, I know some lenders in quotes might be unreasonable, but their unreasonable nature is probably traceable to maybe where they are sourcing their funds from. And if it is, in quotes again, hot money, then they need to ensure that they get these monies back. And that is why you see a lot of reckless behavior in pursuit of recovery. Going on social media, I'm sure you heard about the one that happened last year. The gentleman, they went to recover, and I think shortly after he collapsed and died. So you have to be very, very, very careful with the way you apply overdue charges. And in situations where you see that, look, this thing is not even possible, thank God if you're able to recover 100% of your capital and waive off the interest. And whatever it is you can get in some situation. But I tell you, there are a lot of customers that have integrity. People are very good at bad-mouthing Nigerians, but we ourselves have to actually start improving our own brand ourselves. We have a lot of, more than 80% of an average Nigerian is good. So, but the few that are bad are the ones that we tend to propagate more on. So I think, yes, overdue charges should be taken where there's capacity to pay. But where there's no capacity to pay, I think the focus must and should remain on the principal. Now, on the letting go of one of the C's, if it's a tough one, because they serve different factors. So, but I would take it in terms of importance and relevance. I think the first one is character. If someone doesn't have a good character, whether you have capacity, you have capital, you have collateral, all those things are thrown to waste. So character is very, very, very important. Then, of course, capacity. The person has to have capacity to actually repay the loan, because irrespective of his wealth, and we are very, very funny in this part of the world, we tend to equate wealth to riches, and they are totally different factors. So some people are very rich and very, very, they are not wealthy, So you can have you can be cash rich and you're not generating anything. So then collateral. Now, collateral is important, but the truth is that you can even do away with it. There are some people that have been borrowing for the last 30 years, and never has there been a situation where the collateral they placed for the loan has been realized. So that tells you that collateral itself is not the critical success factor. Condition, which is the economic factors around the loan, this is important. But again, it varies from person to person. So the same situation where 3 people will set up a pure water business, and 1 year, 2 years after, 2 of them have died and 1 is still surviving. And you're asking yourself, is the market conditions not the same? Are the variables not the same for these 3 people? So, but it tells you that sometimes people are able to adapt very, very quickly and are able to respond to the situations they find themselves in. So, in summary, character, capacity, capital are very, very critical in that order. But character is the most important one. Once you have a good character, I think every other thing would gradually fall in place. I hope that I've been able to answer that fairly well.
Yes, you have. Thank you. Dr. Popola, I have a question for you. How will cooperative societies benefit from or use the credit bureau?
Oh, very much the way Page Financial is using it, the same way First Bank is using it. We have quite a lot of cooperatives actually that subscribe to the services of CRC, because cooperative is doing much normal financial intermediation. You know, members contribute money. The members also, which is in form of savings. The members also borrow, which is like credit. And we are quite sure, for a number of cooperatives, they have run into problems where people take their money and just japa, like the very good example that Mr. Akintemi gave. They know they are going to travel. They have only 2 million naira in the cooperative. But because cooperatives say they can borrow 4 million, double the size of the savings they have, they took the 4 million. Before by weekend, they are off. And then that becomes a challenge for the rest of the members of cooperative. So cooperatives should register just normally like a financial institution will register, approach CRC, collect the membership form, and then sign the agreement, pay the joining fee, which is a one-off payment. And then, of course, you are trained on how to submit data of borrowers. And I think that's very, very important. And that can also be very helpful to your members, the members of cooperative, because those who are really have been borrowing from the cooperative and they are meeting the obligations on due time, they have very good scoring. And so a First Bank can then easily advance money to them beyond your cooperative. So they then become feasible in the credit market, and they can use that as other sources of getting credit. In the reverse manner, if somebody has borrowed from your cooperative and has not met the obligations, then a page will see it, a First Bank will see it. And so when he goes tomorrow to a page and say, I want to borrow, they say, oh yeah, you are owing cooperative, your cooperative, you didn't pay. So sorry, we can't get, because you don't pay cooperative, because cooperative is normally by people of interest, the same interest. They know themselves very well. It's either from work or from an organization or from your community, or that's how people go into cooperatives. Nobody goes into cooperative without having relationships, something, maybe a social relationship or a communal relationship or a religious relationship or whatever. So if you are defaulting in that regard, then you default in a financial institution that you don't even have any emotional attachments to. And that's the challenge. So that information will be available to over 2,000 institutions that has in CRC, who can then use it to give you opportunity to really get the repayment that is due to you, because she won't be able to do anything in the financial system when it comes to access to credit. So yes, you are encouraged, cooperatives are encouraged. We have quite a number of them, and every time we keep on adding and adding to them.
And does this also include companies that offer trade credits? Can they also join the bureau? Yes.
My definition of a credit at the beginning, I said it's not just financial institution, it's not just a commercial bank or finance houses or microfinance bank. Even those who sell on credits, pharmaceutical companies, travel agency businesses, a lot of them have institutions that they have retained, and people travel. They just say issue ticket to so, and then maybe they are supposed to pay at the end of the month, but 2-3 months down the line, they don't pay. So they refer such institutions, such entity or institution to the credit bureau. There are people, schools, parents who just some even take away their children, their children from schools just because they are owing a school and they don't want to pay that money. They now go to another school, another session, on another term. Such institution can submit. Schools can submit something. So the same thing with the institution you have mentioned. Yes, so that's it.
Thank you very much, Dr. Popola. I have just one more question for you. And that question is, when reporting a company, can we report the directors as well, even if he did not give a personal guarantee?
Yes, so when you submit your form, part of the information we really collect is director's information as well. And I think what will become useful is when that institution you have reported, somebody wants to conduct a search on them, they also conduct search on the directors of such a company. And therefore, so that's the only position, that's the only opportunity for them to see. So if, let's say, AB Nigeria Limited has 3 directors, and AB Nigeria Limited is owing, and the AB Nigeria Limited has submitted, the data of AB Nigeria Limited have been submitted, let's say by Page Financial, for instance. The next time a First Bank wants to give money to AB Nigeria Limited or for application by them, they will conduct a search not just on AB Nigeria Limited, but also on those 3 directors. That's the way it works. So if AB has not paid, then the directors are also going to be affected. So when a director wants to borrow, then of course it affects them because the country in which they are directors has obligations that are not met. And you can reverse the situation where a director is the one owing, and if that name has been submitted by an institution. So if AB now wants to borrow, AB Nigeria Limited wants to borrow, they will not be able to borrow because one of their directors is indebted somehow. And it's become, not just because it's indebted, but there's a default on that indebtedness. And so it affects their opportunity to borrow. Don't forget also, and I think it's also important to mention this, that even where lending institutions want to bend backwards to look at, they want to give you loan for an institution that had such repayment issue in the past, the price of such loan is likely to be higher than normal one. And that, in addition to that, it also speaks to what the 5-6 that Mr. Akintemi has been talking about, where ordinarily they will not require for collateral. They will not be requiring for collateral because they know that you are not somebody that reliance can be placed on your character, that you will act when you are supposed to act. So they want more comfort. You know, don't forget, it's not their money, it's other people's money they are giving to you. So they will rely on that collateral to give them additional comfort. That's the essence of collateral, that in case you decide to behave in a way that you are unable to pay or you refuse to pay, then they can activate that process towards realizing that collateral or security.
Thank you very much for your insights. We have so many other questions that we're not able to take. We're almost out of time, but I'd like to call on Ms. Alibosu to please give us, within 2-3 minutes, give us some parting words of advice. Okay.
Thank you. Thank you, Peggy. Just to see that customers should just protect their credit rating and ensure that they participate in the coming economic prosperity, because it will depend on capital, and capital is about to be unleashed. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Akintemi, a few parting words.
Very similar to what Mr. Alibosu said. Mine is about every customer imagining and thinking that whatever action they take or inaction, it has reputational and generational damage to your brand. So we should always think about our brand as an individual that is borrowing. And as the lender themselves too, they should imagine also that whatever action they take, whether positive or negative, has a reputational damage to their brand. So they must guard their brand jealously. And the only way by ensuring you guard your brand is to ensure that you are not in the negative books of anyone. It's tough, but you can do it. So it's that for me is what is critical for survival, particularly in these very trying times the country is going through. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Popola. Words of advice for everyone that is here today.
Thank you so much, Peggy. So for me, there are just a couple of 3 or 4 things in just 2 minutes. First is there have been a lot of emphasis on capital and character. Mr. Lebiosu emphasizes capital a lot. Mr. Akintemi emphasizes character a lot. And I think these are 2 important items. Capital is about your access to money. So it's your character that will guarantee that you have access to money. Once you put your character in jeopardy, then you won't have access to capital, and therefore your ability to grow wealth or to grow your business or to even access to basic access to finance to buy consumer product like television or AC, all of those is gone. So capital is very important, but the only way to capital is to have very good character. The character speaks to 2 things: your capacity to pay and your willingness to pay. And you must completely adhere strictly, no matter the condition you find yourself, to be able to do that. Where you have challenges, please always approach your financial institution ahead of time. Don't let that problem become a snowball to you or become a challenge, or that then you are already misbehaving, you are not servicing your loan, you are not even honoring your obligation before you go and approach them. Be very proactive, be preactive. And just approach your institution. Number 2, don't borrow from sharks. There are more than enough financial institutions in Nigeria that are licensed by the central bank. Sharks will make sure that you become a slave to them. I've seen people borrow all these apps that are not licensed, nobody knows them. Then they borrow 15 borrowing, 15, 20 different kind of loans from them. And then once you enter that, cycle, you are unable to come out because they keep on charging you on the daily rate that you're unable to, and then they spoil your name everywhere. They send telephone to everybody, a message to everybody, they send email to everyone, and so on and so forth, to your community. Everybody on your telephone list who are very dear to you, they just massacre your character, and that's the end. So please don't borrow from sharks. There are more than enough financial institutions in Nigeria. You have almost 1,000 microfinance banks. You have finance houses, almost 100 or 200 of them. You have 24 or 27 commercial banks, and there are other mortgage banks. All of them are there that you can really approach. Then the third one is do everything possible to service and pay your loans and meet your obligations. If you refuse and you default 1 day, 2 days, 3 days, all those things matter. Even if you eventually pay, it's already in your record. Those records will be there for 10 years before it can be removed from the credit bureau. And they will affect your scores. They will affect your capacity to borrow. They will affect your ability to get very generous terms and conditions to be able to have access to loan and credit. So please be very careful about that. We are in a very significant challenging macroeconomic period, but that's the more reason why at this time you should not default. And if anything is happening to you, quickly run to those who are very important to you to save you. Your financial institution is one of them. Number 4, which is the last one, check your credit status. Check your credit status all the time. Conduct a credit check through the credit bureau. It's there. Go to CRC website. You can always get your credit report. Download CRC mobile, and then you can have access to your credit report. That way, you are updating. You're on top of the information that is held against you in the public domain that can really affect your access to capital that we've so much emphasized here today. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, sir. I want to assure all our participants that you would receive responses to your questions. You can also, after this session has come to an end, request for additional information by emailing CRC at support@crccreditbureau.com. If you have questions for both Page and First Bank, you can also send them, and we will assist in ensuring that you have responses. We have very quickly come to the end of this webinar, and I'd like to thank our esteemed speakers today. Mr. Alibirsu, thank you very much. Mr. Kinsemi, thank you very much. Dr. Popola, thank you very much for sharing your wealth of experience. I know everyone has benefited from everything that you've said here today. I would also like to thank the team in CRC who organized this webinar, and the participants as well, because without you, this webinar would not be successful. Without you, all the questions you've asked, we would not be able to gain additional insights, or other people won't gain additional insights. We look forward to welcoming you at our next webinar. Thank you very much and have a good afternoon.
Thank you very much. Thank you, my chairman. Much. Thank you, my dear brother and friend, Mr.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr.
Thank you, Peggy.
Thank you very much, Mr. Alibish.
Thank you.
Thank
you.
Right.
Thank you.
Bye.
And thank you, Peggy.
Bye.
Very good
Thank
job.
you.
Well done. Thank you.